strategic cyber, and thanks for letting us be here.
I want my baby back, baby back. Just making sure it works. Good morning. I'm Raphael Mudge. Came all the way out here from Washington, D.C., but I'm originally from Detroit. I started out with the industry and Safari BBSs back in the day, if anybody remembers those. If he's out there, hi, Tony. Sorry for all the pain I was back in the day. And if you remember Advanced Data Net as well, I used to work there back in the late 90s, so Detroit to my roots. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about something that I think is going to be a topic pretty at home amongst this group, and that's about how to make security operations better using the different things penetration testers and red teams like to do. So I'm going to give you a bunch of updated thoughts on adversary replication and penetration testing. So for those who might have missed it, my name is Raphael Mudge, and my cousin runs this wonderful deli. Poor Greg, he doesn't know that I'm like stealing all his credibility. I don't have my own corporate logo up here, but I fear I'd fly the Mudgie's flag and say, you know, go eat a good sandwich. Because you're allowed a corporate plug, right? One slide per talk. This is mine. I had the Lockwood yesterday. It was delicious. Just saying. And I like Faygo as well. And Better Made. It's cool. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to start out. I'll introduce myself just a little bit, like my background, why I care about this area. But I promise to be very brief. We'll learn a little bit about where I lived in Germany, which is pretty key to this whole talk. And then we're going to go into the concept of hacking to get caught. And what do I mean by that? What's the value of that? And talk about the role an offensive professional can play looking at security operations, the ability to detect and respond. What I'm then going to do is kind of summarize the conversation to date. And I'm really happy to do that here because one of the groups I think is really driving this and has some great ideas in this space is MISEC and what they're doing with these security exercises. So I don't even know if you knew I was going to be plugging you so hard in this talk, but has nothing to do with the location, everything to do with I think these are the right ideas at the right time, and I'm doing everything I can to promote them. And we'll talk about adversary simulations, which is my own view of how this stuff kind of comes together, and just talk about a few of the challenges, some being tooling related, others kind of cultural, and wrap it up there. So, personal introduction. Like I said, my corporate logo, the only one I'm putting up, is the Mudgies. I'm cool with that. I am a vendor. I actually build tools that red teams use. I'm actually very fortunate. I get to work with the very, very high end of the industry, government, military, financial sector. Actually, it's broader than that in the private sector, but it's neat work. I work with folks doing full scope operations, and doing long-term operations as well, like actually, no kidding, year-long type of things. So I have a lot of fun on this red team problem set, and folks who've read my blog and who've seen me speak know that I'm really angled there. But one of my personal interests is not just serving that segment of the industry or working there. I think there's some ideas and lessons learned, some things that can be done at organizations of all levels of maturity to help them be better at their ability to detect and respond. So we're not going to talk about, hey, how do you do this full scope thing with an O-day and stay in for a year? It's not really relevant to most organizations. What we're going to talk about is things that matter now. So that's kind of my my hat in the ring on this. But let's start with kind of an analogy. And these next 3 slides really are the whole talk. The rest of it's just mapping this analogy back to our field. So this is my house when I was in Germany as a fresh second lieutenant. I don't live in anything like that now. I live in a tiny Washington, D.C. apartment. All of them are tiny. They call them micro apartments. It's their way of selling you more for less, or selling you less for more, yes. But this was my house back in 2004. And let's say I want to secure this house, okay? What I might do is bring in a penetration tester to look at all the different things an attacker might see as ways in and tell me all the problems I have in my house and how to make them better. Penetration tester might say, hey, Raph, you know that lock your landlord installed? Well, that lock only has 4 different keys available for it, and anybody can buy that at the hardware store. So you really need to put new locks in. I'm like, okay, that's actionable. I'll do it. And they might say, hey, Raph, that window you always leave open because you need to air out your house, an attacker can get in that way. You really need to do something about that window. And I'm like, but I don't want my house to mold. Okay, I'll do that. That's cool, pen tester. Sure. But the list goes on and on and on, and they're telling me all the things wrong with my house and way somebody could break in. And I think those of you who own a security program probably have had a similar experience, right? You've been told what's wrong, and you might say, yeah, that makes sense, but there was a reason that that wrong thing is there. So that's fine. What do you do? What do I do? Well, maybe I hire the German version of Guardian Alarm. Say, okay, I know I can't keep an attacker out. At the very least, even after I change all my locks and I let my laundry room get moldy because I have to close the window, an attacker could still throw a rock through and end up in anyways, right? You know, I could just break the glass. So what choice do I have? I mean, I've got to live with it. So fine. I hired Guardian Alarm. Guardian Alarm, what they're doing, they're monitoring my house for an intrusion to hopefully catch it in time such that I don't lose all my valuable stuff. And you can imagine, brand new second lieutenant, I had a lot of valuable stuff. Yeah, it was actually embarrassing. This is why I live in a small apartment today. I had 4 bedrooms. One of them was devoted to the ironing board because I actually owned nothing. And to this day, that's still the case. So it was pretty funny. But I learned that lesson young, and that was good for me. But either way, let's say I want to protect my ironing board because it's my most valuable possession next to my Macintosh. So I want to protect my ironing board. Well, it's my hope that Guardian Alarm is going to catch somebody running off with my stuff. So I bring in a red team. And I say, hey, red team, break into my house and take my stuff. Or, hey, red team, I'll even let you in or give you a key or do something that I wouldn't normally do. Go steal my stuff and let's see what happens. Because what I want to know is did Guardian actually detect the idea that somebody stole my stuff? You know, did they detect that some sort of intrusion took place? Okay? But that by itself, them detecting, is only part of the puzzle. Because them detecting, if it's done too late, excuse me, PowerPoint, you're ruining my transition. If it's done too late, them detecting is kind of useless because if the person's already made off with everything I really care about, then all Guardian's giving me is this heads up, like, hey, before the police get there, long after what really happened, you know, sorry, bro, your stuff's gone. My hope is that the response would be better than that. My hope would be that Guardian would detect that somebody had broken into my house and that the entire life cycle of the response, from Guardian calling me to deconflict to the police arriving, would be done in such a way that maybe my ironing board and Macintosh could be saved, right? That's a pretty common sense idea. You have somebody doing detection, you have a whole system that goes into response. You probably want to know if it works or not. And that's a big investment. So I use that analogy to start things off because this is what I want to talk about, some of the ideas I want to raise, is that I think there's a lot of value to be had in having security assessments that don't just focus on the attack surface, that don't just focus on what's wrong, but focus on the controls and processes that kick off after a breach happens. Okay? And so for lack of a better term, I say the post-compromise security posture. Pick whatever term you think is good for that. But really, here's what I'm interested in. I think if we had security assessments and models focused on security operations, detection and response, there's a few benefits we could realize right away. The first is these kinds of assessments would be a great vehicle to train and measure the teams responsible for detection and response. Also, very important, you'll notice there's a lot of intrusions happening, right? You know, major banks getting hit, insurance companies. On one hand, I'm sad about those, but on the other hand, I will tell you, those organizations usually start building out big red teams right away. And I can follow the news to see where the next quote requests come from. It's kind of fun. But there's a point to this. An organization of any size, any level, especially one significant enough to be in the news for a breach, they're already doing a lot of what we would consider the right things. They have a SOC. They have threat intelligence. They own every product under the sun. They have FireEye. They have this. They have that. That stuff's all really expensive, right? So the question is, and the question any security program owner should be asking is, how do I validate this investment? How do I validate that these things, as deployed in my organization, as fit into the process I have, how do I validate that these things work? I think that's a really important question, rather than just throwing money at the problem. And I know from the work I do, some organizations are really, they take a very heartfelt look at this. Others, I get the impression they really just spend money to say that they own everything, to say, yeah, we care about security. Look at all the stuff we bought. But buying stuff alone doesn't mean anything unless you actually validate its utility to your organization. So let's talk about a few models to do this. And of course, I have my own opinions in here, but I want to share with you others and their take on this. So many of the folks who work in the penetration testing field are very familiar with SANS and probably very familiar with John Strand, right? Black Hills Information Security. One of the things that I like that John is constantly pushing as a message is this idea that at the end of every penetration test, the folks involved with the penetration test should be working very hard to give a customer an idea of what their detection threshold is. And so John, he always puts up this slide, tells people to steal it, so I did, and says, hey, you should go through all these different things. You should load up Meterpreter in its most unobfuscated form, see if it gets caught. And you should go from there all the way up to some high level of sophistication to tell the customer where they're at. And one of my favorite stories that John likes to tell is he'll often go through this full checklist at his customer sites. And these customers will often have a managed security service provider who's handling their detection and response in an outsourced basis. And he'll find that they don't call. And if they're not calling over some of the really, really simple low-hanging fruit stuff, what are you paying for? So that is, at the very simplest, is a concept for validating detection and response. Is your guardian alarm doing their job? One of the approaches I'm a big fan of that came out of the Michigan security community, out of MISEC, is the concept of what they call security exercises. And I promise you, me being a fan of this has nothing to do with me being here. I don't think Wolf knew I was going to plug it until like 5 minutes before I got up here. But here's the MISEC approach to security exercises. So first, the same agreement on the problem statement. Detection and response matters. This is a part of your security program worth evaluating, independent of all the steps you might take to make it so an attacker has a harder time getting in the first place. So their concept of security exercises, or your concept of security exercises, it's your model, is to first build a threat model that's relevant to the customer. And that might consist of going through the news. For example, if you're an insurance company, you might say, hey, there was this major breach that occurred, and here's everything that's known publicly about it. Let's try to take that information and build up a timeline of what we think it could look like to us if we're an insurance company that cares about the same thing. So you build a storyboard of a potential attack timeline. And then you use a team of security professionals to execute that storyboard. What's really cool, though, about the MISEC approach, and something I'm a big fan of, is I use the word red team here, because apparently I use that with everything. I use it in relationships. I use it in everything, apparently. Right? Yes. So, but what I really mean by having somebody execute the storyboard, one of the key tenets of the MISEC model is to have this spreadsheet of observable events, observable things that a security operations staff should have been able to latch onto to see this thing happen. And what they do is they white card every aspect of it, and anything goes to generate that observable effect. And the whole point is that this timeline, this spreadsheet of observable actions, is a tool to guide a very, very detailed debrief at the end to see what was seen, what wasn't, and from that information you can start to ask why. Why didn't we see this observable event? Were our tools and sensors not capable of it? Were they capable of it but instrumented wrong? Or were they seen by our tools and sensors but we had a process error or something happening with the human in the loop? These are valuable insights to get on a security program. The great thing about this approach is it's something that can be done. It can be executed in a day or two with a week or two of preparation, and it's something you can do on a quarterly basis, and you can do cheaply. So if you want to learn more about this approach, I recommend you follow up with a couple of talks. Nick Jacob gave this talk. I have to read my slide to get the title right. Threat models that exercise your SIEM and incident response. And Mark Kikta, belt face. Everybody loves belt. Belt. Only guy to ever hack himself during one of my workshops. It's pretty cool. So Mark gave a great talk called Seeing Purple, talking about purple teaming, which is very much in the same spirit of this, using an offensive professional, an offensive expert, to sit down with security operations staff, help them get better at detection and response. So I'm a very big fan of the MISEC approach, and these two talks are kind of the main canon of it. And MISEC folks in the back, did I do it justice? Yep, thumbs up, cool. Happy to hear that. I've been giving the same spiel for a while, so want to make sure. Cool. So you might be asking, that's great, Raph. What's your take on it? Because I have a horse in this race. I care about this topic. I do a lot of attack simulations as part of red versus blue war games, more than I care to count now. And these big war games, which are a very niche thing, and I admit that, one of the key ideas in them, though, is that you're focusing on getting caught. As a red team or as an aggressor or OP4, my goal is to help the training audience, the blue teams, actually get better at detection and response against a modern adversary. And so as a developer and an occasional hacker, these are things I care about. So a while ago, I think it was May 2014, I gave this talk, same title, but extremely different content, called Hacking to Get Caught, a Concept for Adversary Replication and Penetration Testing. And you can find that on Iron Geek's website. I'm a big Adrian Crenshaw fan. So in that talk, I try to lay out what I see as a cyber aggressor. And an aggressor is a military term for a professional that plays the role of a real or representative adversary with a high level of detail. And I tend to see red teams playing mostly the role of a representative adversary. So in cyber, I say an aggressor is somebody that takes threat intelligence and tradecraft and uses that to carry out their red actions to simulate a real attack. And I see the value of this as a method to actually exercise a customer's analytical capability as well as their technical controls. Because when I'm playing the role of an aggressor, my interest is is the training audience doing the analysis to actually figure out this is a low-level attack from somebody you may not need to care about, and this is something more sophisticated. What's funny, though, and kind of ironic, and plays to a lot of people's complaints about this, when I play that role, I often use very low-level, unsophisticated things to misdirect the training audience and to force them to hopefully not get on my tail that something more sophisticated is happening. But the whole idea of that talk was I was really trying to speak about models to use threat intelligence in a security program and help that get better. Because I'm actually a very, very big fan of threat intelligence. Those of you who don't recognize this, it's from a blog post, one of my favorites of all time, from a gentleman named David Bianco, and it's called The Pyramid of Pain. And here's the whole idea. David Bianco's thesis is that there's a lot of threat intelligence out there and a lot of people selling it. But a lot of folks are looking at it, in his opinion, and I'll say my opinion as well, looking at it wrong. Some folks are looking at threat intelligence as a way to get a feed of automated indicators, IP addresses, hashes, that they can ingest into their tools and kind of get automated, up-to-date information on what real adversaries are doing to find them in their network. There are other companies that have been doing this for a really long time. It's called antivirus, right? So, and they have better heuristics and engines to do it. To me, the value of threat intelligence is actually when you get into the higher level narratives in those reports that nobody likes to read. And let me give you an example of what I mean. One of the things I've used to good effect when playing the role of a red adversary is DNS beaconing, for example. You know, I like to use a DNS payload to call out low and slow out of a network to maintain a hook, to maintain a lifeline. And I've used that for a couple of years now, and I'm off it as my main thing, but I still use it because it's expected now. But a lot of folks I've worked with have had trouble dealing with this particular tactic for maintaining a lifeline into a network. Some get into the whack-a-mole mindset. They're like, okay, we need to find out every domain and start blocking it. But the danger is that causes very little pain to me as an adversary. It's like, okay, great. I've got 10 domains right now. I start noticing that my callbacks are getting delayed here and there because some of them are blocked. Well, what I do is I just update my infrastructure before all 10 of my domains are gone, and then I'm still in the network and I'm ahead of their ability to clean me out that way. Because focusing on these lower level indicators is giving them very little benefit. Where you can really cause pain to an attacker is when you get up to the top and you start to focus on the tactic, the technique, or the procedure itself and take it off the table altogether. And there are ways to do this with DNS beaconing. One option is to re-architect your network. I know it's painful, but I'm using this as an example. If you re-architect your network such that you have what's called a split-split configuration, where workstations cannot make DNS queries at all their internet connectivity goes out through a proxy that does it for them, that takes DNS beaconing off the table, okay? So it is possible by design to mitigate an adversary tactic. And if you do, no amount of changing strings or updating a tool on my end is going to defeat that. That tactic is gone. You now have one less thing to worry about. So when I think of threat intelligence, I see the value of it as a way of informing this decision-making process. Are we as an organization ready to take the pain to architect our network in a different way to take this tactic off the table? Or can we design something that takes that tactic off the table and always detects it? Because if I use DNS as a communication channel, it gets pretty noisy pretty quickly. And if you're doing even the most basic kind of detection, just looking for the amount of traffic going to a domain in a day, you've got a good chance of catching not necessarily DNS beaconing, but DNS as a covert communication channel. And so this, just an example I like to use when I talk about why is threat intelligence valuable. It becomes valuable when you're focusing on the top of the pyramid, not the bottom. And something I'm very thankful for. I've wondered for a very long time when the threat intelligence companies would catch on to the idea that the threat intelligence that they produce and sell could be paired with security assessments and used to not only find out is the customer using the threat intelligence product appropriately and to their benefit, but what are the best models and ways to get better at using it. And for a long time, a lot of folks who even work in this field kind of looked at me with kind of a doe-eyed approach, and it really bothered me. Because I'm like, you're the ones selling this. You're the ones who should be doing this. So to the best of my knowledge, the first company on this is Eyesight Partners. Eyesight Partners is a threat intelligence company. I want to say they're headquartered in Virginia. And several years ago, they bought a company called White Wolf Security, who is very much a pioneer in building kind of cyber training ranges. Well, one of the things they've really kind of merged on, and what I should say is what I'm going to talk about here is so new for them, their website doesn't even reflect it. I was having a 1 a.m. conversation via email with somebody last night saying, hey, I want to talk about what your company's doing because it's great. Can you give me some bullets? But I know these folks pretty well, so what Eyesight's doing is using their threat space range expertise is they have a service now where they'll reconfigure their range to look like a few enclaves within your environment, okay? And then they're going to take the threat intelligence that they have, because that's what they do. They're a threat intelligence company, and they're going to build up a relevant scenario for that customer's industry or environment. And MISEC folks, sounding familiar so far? Kind of cool. It's a good model. So what then Eyesight does is they execute this scenario in their range with their customer's network defense team as the training audience. And they do it in a range because one of the things Eyesight likes to do is they actually like to use the real malware that they find out in the wild. And doing that in a range is much better than doing it in production because this is controlled, it's isolated, it's safe. But the whole goal of Eyesight's approach is to help their customers exercise their roles as a team, exercise their processes and procedures, and develop and test best practices to use the threat intelligence they're paying for to augment network defense. Okay? So that's the whole point of this approach. So I'm really happy to see threat intelligence provider jumping into this, and I won't disclose details I'm not at liberty to disclose, but the feedback I'm hearing on this approach is it's wildly successful, and it very much resonates with the customer base they're targeting. And I know I'm trying to recommend different people I know to go work with them because I think this is very much in the right direction. But there's still more. Microsoft. Microsoft last year put out a white paper on how they're doing red teaming now, okay? And I recommend this white paper to anybody interested in this topic. You can find it by Googling using cutting-edge threat simulation to harden the Microsoft Enterprise Cloud. Here's what Microsoft does. First, for their red team, they're not doing full scope operations. And that's a big difference than what most people think of as red teaming. Most people think of red teaming as an anything goes event where the red teamer or pen tester can do whatever they want to break in to show you how awesome they are and cost you a lot of money. I'm not necessarily a fan of that either. Microsoft kind of saw that and they're like, if an adversary is going to get in no matter what, and what we really care about is detection and response, why don't we just take the get in part off the table and move to an assumed compromise model where we always assume we're breached because these particular assessments are focused on security operations. Other people are trying to make breaches harder. That's their job. Let's focus on detection and response with our red team. So here's the way Microsoft does that. The compromise piece is white-carded. They try to use the same tactics and techniques that they see real adversaries employing. They do this against production infrastructure without the actual security operations team knowing it's coming. But again, the whole goal is detection and response. And one of my favorite things in this paper is the fact that Microsoft has metrics that they're working on. The two metrics they care about, mean time to detect and mean time to remediate. And over a course of time, executing these engagements again and again, it's Microsoft's goal to show a downward trend on these two metrics, to show that yes, because of this investment, because of this support role the red team is playing, our security operations are getting better at detecting, and they're getting better at response, and we're showing it by trying to throw a wide variety of tactics at them time and again, and they get better every time. One of the things that's really challenging with this is that it requires full disclosure between red and blue afterwards. And I will tell you, as a vendor, that is a point of contention, because a lot of red teams, the ones that have been doing this for a very long time, usually have custom tool sets, custom capability that cost a lot of money and time to build and mature. And a lot of red teams have traditionally been culturally very opposed to full disclosure, because their feeling is if they give up everything about how their stuff works, they're going to no longer be effective. So one of the things for us as a red community is we have to do everything we can to explore ways to allow ourselves to do full disclosure, but be relevant engagement to engagement. And that's a challenge we haven't had to deal with before. So for what that's worth. But Microsoft's got a great white paper. I definitely recommend giving it a read. So far I've talked a lot about using threat intelligence and pairing it with traditional offensive actions to make security operations better, right? Okay, that's cute. What do I really mean by that? Like, is this pie in the sky? Or can this actually be made concrete? So I'd like to do, because I'm a pretty technical guy, is I'd like to take you through just kind of one example of this thought process, but very much just a snippet in time. So I want to talk about another option for lateral movement. So around Halloween of last year, CrowdStrike put out this really great blog post, again, one of my favorites, called Malware-Free Intrusions, Adversary Tricks and Treats. And they were talking about an actor that they called Deep Panda, which they allege is an A-level actor associated with the country that they put the panda label on. I don't remember which one that is, but whatever. It's cool. I mainly care about the tactics and techniques. But here's what this actor does. So Deep Panda is this A-level actor living in a world where they're dealing with advanced hunting techniques. So what this Deep Panda actor probably realizes, or at least CrowdStrike speculates that they realize, is when you're dealing with a really well-instrumented network, and again, being as technology neutral as I can, but when you're dealing with things like Carbon Black or any of these platforms that allow you to instrument your network and look at data at scale and figure out what's bad and what's not, or take a hunch and actually run it against your network and understand and see if that pattern is out there. That's really hard for a red actor. And there's a lot of things you can do that make it just really hard to use malware in every system. So this actor has moved to an approach where they're solely using native tools for lateral movement and stealing data out of a network beyond their initial foothold. And I think that's a really good thing to train people against, because I see some teams getting better at finding arbitrary malware, but they're still not good at detecting bad behavior. So let me show you what lateral movement looks like for the Deep Panda actor. Okay. So here I am in my ConVerge demonstration program, and I have a foothold inside of just a little test network, and I'm going to try to mimic Deep Panda's lateral movement. So here's the scenario. Deep Panda was in the network maybe 6 months ago, got cleaned out, left, whatever, and decided to regain their foothold and regain control of the network. The first thing I'm going to do as this Deep Panda actor is ingest what's called a golden ticket. And this is straight out of CrowdStrike's report in terms of things this actor likes to do. A golden ticket is a Kerberos ticket that I, the attacker, generate that allows me to interact with systems as a domain administrator. And the only way I'm able to forge this ticket is because I was on a domain controller before, and I captured the shared secret that the Kerberos mechanism relied on for its security. What that is beyond the scope of this talk, but just take it that I have this ticket file from November 2014, and if I ingest it, I'll have domain admin rights. So right now, let's just take a look at my user Raphi, do a little whoami/groups, and I just want you to understand that Raphi right now is a nobody on this network, no special rights. And I'm going to just interrogate the network briefly and just do a net view whack domain to see if there's a target I want. And I'm going to go after this Windows 8 workstation. So first thing I'm going to do, just to show you I'm not making anything up, is I'm going to just try to do admin-only action and interact with the $C share. And if I can, then I already have rights, and if I can't, I don't. Okay? So now I'm going to ingest this ticket to give myself some rights and verify that I have the rights I want. So that's actually fine. Aren't I awesome? Kerberos ticket used, corp.ticket. Okay, you know what's funny? Actually, before I gave this demo, I actually tested out my ticket, and it was a happy ticket. But that's okay, because I'm a great improviser. So for whatever reason, my ticket doesn't like me. So what I'm going to do is move my demo along, and we'll use credentials that maybe I captured elsewhere. I'm an aggressor, and my job is to improvise. And actually, that plays through in real life. One of the things I get asked about constantly is, Raph, if we can plan an attack scenario step by step by step and break it down by observable action, why do we need a red team? Why don't we just automate all this? Why don't we just simulate it? And I will tell you, when you start dealing with hardening measures, when you start dealing with ground truth reality, it's very important to have an operator who can adapt and actually make the observable effect happen so that the training value goes off. So this is actually a very good kind of teachable moment, because this is exactly what you need a trained professional to be doing and why you don't want to automate it away. So what I'm going to do is put in my Gmail password, just kidding. And I'm going to just do a net use over that system and check that I can do a privileged action. Cool. Okay, so I've established a trust relationship. Could have been with my golden ticket, boo-hoo golden ticket, or it could have been with creds. Fine. Okay. Now, getting into the threat emulation piece. What Deep Panda likes to do for lateral movement is they like to use Wimic to run a command on a remote system. But that command that they run a series of commands to modify the registry to make it so that, one, RDP is enabled, and two, they set up a backdoor that we lovingly called sticky keys. So how many of you are familiar, if you log into a system, excuse me, let me log out, you hit shift 5 times, you get this program that comes up, sethc.exe. Okay? Well, what Deep Panda likes to do is this. They like to say, okay, well, I'm going to use Wimic. And since I'm not using a golden ticket, I'm going to slightly modify this. And actually, you know what, for giggles, because I tested this out, I will just go with creds. Okay, so I'm going to use the creds I happen to know. In this case, I'll just put them in. User corp administrator, password : and zebra 1234 bang. Don't log into my Gmail account. Just kidding. And what I'm going to do is this Deep Panda emulated actor is I'm going to run this registry command to create an option called debugger under image file executions, or image file execution options, that makes it so when sethc.exe runs, Windows will instead kick off the debugger for it, which I've set to command.exe. And that has really wonderful results for us as an attacker, which we'll see in a moment, once I master the art of copy and paste. You would think I'd be better at copy and paste, given that I wrote a GUI for Metasploit. Seriously. Okay. It's all good. Okay, computer, shell, Wimic. So what I'm going to do is kick off this Wimic command with these creds and tell Wimic to run this command to modify the registry. I could have also optionally specified the parameters to remotely interact with the registry with the reg command itself. But Deep Panda likes to use Wimic this way, so we're doing it that way. Cool. Now, I'm just going to speed up my communications, open up a SOX proxy, and I'm going to tunnel our desktop through this foothold malware so I can emulate the actions of this Deep Panda actor. So I'm going to use a tool called proxy chains, which allows me to force another program through the tunnel I just set up. So I'm going to do proxy chains, our desktop, 172.168.83. I'm going to RDP to my target, same way a Deep Panda actor would. Hit Shift 5 times. I now have a system-level shell I can use to interact with the target. And the reason I use this vignette, because it's very tool agnostic, is the way this actor is doing lateral movement is basically enabling these malware-free backdoors on the targets they want to interact with, using normal system administration tools to interact with the target, getting what they want, then undoing their changes. How many organizations are ready to deal with that kind of activity? That's the point of an aggressor. That's the point of adversary simulations. That's the point of doing this stuff time and again, is to actually start exercising our security programs against these kind of out-of-the-box actions that adversaries are really using. You know they're really using it because it came from a threat intelligence report. That's the point of those reports, is to steer your focus. So that's my example of lateral movement, and also the reason I posted this to Twitter a while ago. I love lateral movement because there's so many ways to do it, and one of my frustrations is that a lot of folks just see lateral movement as PS exec. So on Twitter a while ago, I said I would really like a bumper sticker that says lateral movement, it's more than just PS exec. And somebody actually mailed me one. I don't know who it was. If it was somebody here, I thank you. But that vignette, that little demo, is one of the kind of reasons for that thinking, is there's a lot of ways to do offense, and if we're going to get really better at detection and response, we need to expand our tool sets, expand our options. Okay, so far I've taken you through a lot of ideas about how to exercise security operations as part of a healthy, balanced security program. A good question is, does this have a name? The answer is yes, but unfortunately has a lot of names because there has not been convergence on what to call this. But we're at ConVergeCon, so maybe we can make that happen. So some people call this threat emulation or adversary emulation. I've also heard cyber threat emulation, attack simulation. A lot of these concepts also apply within purple teaming. And some of my friends actually jokingly call this red team light, because you're doing red team things, you're doing post-exploitation and lateral movement, but because of assumed breach, you're not really doing what real red teamers would call red teaming. And I'll tell you, as a businessman, my main concern is providing value to the people I'm supporting. So I don't really care about proving what I can do or being tested in engagement. I just care about making a security program better. So I'm cool with red team light. One thing about purple teaming, I always throw this in. One of the things about the discussion around purple teaming that's always kind of just knitted at me a little bit is a lot of the discussion has focused on using penetration testing tools and techniques after a pen test to sit down with analysts and make them better. I would say I'm fine with the umbrella that purple teaming is cooperation between red and blue to make security better, to make security operations better. But I would ask that you at least consider the idea of marrying the red actions with threat intelligence as its own thing. Because if I have one flag I want to carry, it's that we really need to move beyond just demonstrating PS exec time and again and the same one technique and get used to demonstrating a variety of techniques, because that's the only way we're going to really know where the program's at in terms of detection and response and have meaningful metrics that are hopefully trending downward. Just the same way you wouldn't send the same spearfishing email over and over again every quarter to see if folks are getting better at catching fishes, right? So when I think of adversary simulations, and I kind of want to put all this together, here's kind of some of the things I tend to think about, the common elements. I think of an adversary simulation as a focus on security operations, several white-carded things, sometimes even white-carded credentials if you're dealing with a situation where you're emulating a long-term embedded adversary. Why spend a year getting to that point if you think it's possible? Why not just say, day one, you're that, go, here, I'm not going to look, do stuff on my domain controller, do what you need to do, we'll start the engagement and see where we're at. It's not to say that the white carding makes it better, but it certainly makes it cheaper, and there's a lot to be said for that. So adversary simulations, usually a white box approach because you're not testing the assessor. You're trying to actually find out where your program's at. You're emulating the tactics, techniques, and procedures of a modern adversary, usually guided with a storyboard, maybe based on an attack timeline to make sure that there's good debrief points. And very key is that there's a full debrief between red and blue. When I think about all the discussion happening in this area, I kind of consider these common elements to be what would be part of a best practice. There are a few challenges. First, when I talk about adversary simulations or red team light, a lot of people try to humor me and say, Raph, you're a nice guy. And I appreciate what you're saying, but I really see no value in it because that is only valuable to the highest of high-end organizations. Nobody else needs this because they're still struggling with the basics. And while I appreciate there is a hacker concept of giving out vulnerabilities in soup kitchens to help folks get better, I think any security program that has any kind of detection and response component can benefit from some model to actually find out where that program is at in terms of detection response. Whether it's even as simple as the approach John Strand advocates, where you're just saying, hey, is your managed security service provider picking up the basic stuff, all the way up to doing quarterly small red team things with an assumed breach model. I think there's a model for every program, but if you make an investment in security operations, I think there's an obligation to validate it. The other challenge is that white carding is not very popular. It's not popular with hackers and pen testers because some see it as like they're resigning that, hey, I can't do it. That's not true. Given enough time and resources, probably any of us could. It's just a cost effectiveness thing. Unfortunately, white carding isn't popular with some customers too. Some customers do come into the discussion, or not even the customer, maybe one person in the organization, and says, we can't be hacked, we're good. And I've seen very, very large companies come across with that. In those cases, they need to light some money on fire to have a professional red team over time demonstrate, yes, you can be hacked. Now that we've proven that, can we do some other things that are more targeted to actually make your program better? So I think white carding is very important, but there are barriers to it, and that's a challenge to this approach. The other problem is that tooling and education isn't there either. There's a lot of market understanding of what is a penetration test, and there's a lot of courses and a lot of free material and software to support penetration testing, enumerating an attack surface, finding out what's wrong so you can turn in a prioritized list of what to fix. the tooling, the covert communications, the indicator level reporting, the ability to spit out a timeline of every attacker action, we don't have good tooling in this area. And I will tell you, I go up there with a straight face. I try to sell software that supports these kind of things. And even my tooling is nowhere near where it should be to support this beautiful future of making things better. It's a really, really long road. So I think tooling is a big gap as well. But I'm very excited about this concept of adversary simulations. I'm very excited about all the models I'm seeing. I'm excited about what Microsoft's doing, what ISET Partners is doing. I'm very excited about the model I see the MISEC community pioneering, because I see these adversary simulations, these security exercises, as things that can be done in a cost and time effective way. They're repeatable, and the customers who've gotten past the we can't be hacked, the ones who are like, please just help me get better, help me validate that expensive stuff I paid for, those customers do get it, okay? And I see these adversary simulations as an opportunity to expose the customers we support to more hacking techniques and ideas beyond what just is possible with Metasploit or any other tool that we use. This is a chance to broaden the horizons of our defensive community and, as a red team, play the role of an educator. So I know that was a lot of material. In summary, I introduced myself. I'm a vendor. I build stuff. I'm very interested in this area. I think hacking to get caught, to exercise security operations, is something that hasn't had enough attention. I think now's the right time to start bringing this into more programs. I summarized the conversation around this, talked about how I see adversary simulations, and some of the challenges. And I do blog a lot about this. One of the first blog posts I put out on it was Adversary Simulation Becomes a Thing, so if you want to check that out. And I believe I'm out of time, so with that, I'll be in the back, so if anybody's got any questions, and thank you for your time.